RHOC Vicki Gunvalson will never forgive Bravo's exploitation in Darkest Hour. RHOC star Vicki Gunvalson was given the first Lifetime Achievement Award at the 2023 BravoCon. In a new interview, she blasts the network for exploiting one of the darkest moments of her life. She said she'll never forgive them. Keep reading to find out what she's talking about. Throughout her 14 seasons, the insurance agent has let cameras in on all aspects of her life, including her ex-boyfriend Brooks Ayers' fake cancer scam. Vicki Gunvalson loves whooping it up on the show, but she can't forgive the network for the time they crossed a huge line. What happened? Vicki Gunvalson filmed one of the most iconic scenes in the history of the franchise. Her mother unexpectedly passed away during season 10 of the show. The cameras caught the moment Vicki learned about her mother's death. Fans always assumed that Vicki gave the go-ahead to film the emotional moment, but it turns out she didn't give them permission. In an interview for an upcoming episode of Vice's The Dark Side of Reality TV, Vicki Gunvalson pulls the curtain back on Bravo. Vicki and her castmates were playing bunco at Shannon Beater's house when the phone call came in, but according to the RHOC star, her family had been trying to reach her for over an hour before the show informed her of the call. Furthermore, she claimed that they delayed telling her so that they had time to set up cameras in Shannon Beater's wrapping paper room, where Vicki eventually took the call from her daughter, Brianna. In a clip exclusively given to People magazine, Vicki Gunvalson expresses her disappointment with the network. "I was really upset that production knew for an hour, and they didn't tell me. They were out of line, and I think they should have taken me aside and said, 'Your mom has passed. Talk to your daughter off camera.' I will never forgive Bravo for that." RHOC's Vicki Gunvalson recalls the traumatic moment that she learned of her mother's death on camera. She added that she will never forgive Bravo for filming her reaction to her mom's death. What do you think of her saying this all these years later? Jennifer Havener grew up in a small town in upstate New York. She earned her BA in Writing and Literature from Rhobh University in Boulder, Colorado. She always knew watching reality TV shows and soap operas, particularly Days of Our Lives, would come in handy someday. When she's not writing, she's playing with her dogs, Lola and Ruger. RHOC's Vicki Gunvalson will never forgive Bravo's exploitation in Darkest Hour for over a decade. Vicki Gunvalson was the cornerstone of the Real Housewives of Orange County, RHOC, a character who transitioned from a reality TV housewife to a pop culture icon. Vicki, with her fiery personality, unapologetic boldness, and no-nonsense attitude, set the template for what it meant to be a real housewife. She was not just a reality star, she was the OG of the OC. But as Bravo pushed the boundaries of reality TV more than ever, it became clear that the network was not just casting for stars, it was exploiting them. For Vicki, the exploitation came to a head during what was perhaps her darkest hour on the show. Her forced departure, the way it unfolded, and Bravo's role in her emotional unraveling. Despite being a key figure for the show's success, Vicki's relationship with Bravo has soured beyond repair. She will never forgive the network for how they handled her exit and her personal crisis, all while profiting off the very moments that broke her down. The rise of Vicki Gunvalson, the Queen of Orange County. Vicki Gunvalson's entrance into RHOC was nothing short of revolutionary for reality television. A self-made businesswoman and a mother who was always looking out for number one, Vicki embodied a brash, unapologetic confidence that the world had never seen in the world of housewives before. From the very first season, Vicki's aggressive business acumen, penchant for drama, and tumultuous relationships made her a polarizing yet magnetic figure. Audiences could not look away. Her life, though often messy, felt authentic. Whether it was her complicated romance with ex-husband Don, her turbulent marriage to Brooks Ayers, or her fiery interactions with fellow housewives, Vicki always brought something to the table. She was the heartbeat of the show, the one that made it tick, and in return Bravo rewarded her with a throne of sorts as the face of the franchise. But Vicki's long-standing role as the franchise's anchor began to sour when the network, sensing a shift in viewer interest and the need for fresh drama, began pulling at threads that Vicki didn't want to unravel. And what followed would not just be the end of her reign, but a deep betrayal that she would never forget. The turning point. Bravo's unforgiving net-worth power dynamics on The Real Housewives are complex. While many of the women come and go, the show relies on certain core figures. Vicki was one of those core figures for RHOC, but Bravo, ever the shrewd business entity, saw the writing on the wall. The network's thirst for new blood and fresh narratives meant that longtime housewives, especially ones like Vicki, who had given them so much for years, were at risk of being discarded once their drama no longer felt profitable. For Vicki, the shift started with the casting changes and the increasingly public struggles in her personal life. Her breakup with Brooks Ayers, which had been drawn out on the show for years, had turned into a public spectacle. Bravo, eager to create a narrative that would resonate with audiences, continually used Vicki's relationship with Brooks as a storyline. This despite Vicki's repeated insistence that her private life, especially her romantic entanglements, were hers to manage outside of the show. As her personal turmoil unfolded, specifically her strained relationships with her daughter Brianna, her ex-husband Don, and her ongoing drama with Brooks, Bravo did not offer her the respect that one might expect for a long-standing star. Instead, they used her emotional vulnerability as fuel for drama. They invited cameras into her home during moments when she was at her lowest, turning her deepest crises into television gold. At the height of the controversy surrounding Brooks, Bravo had a choice. They could support Vicki as a loyal, long-time cast member, or they could capitalize on her turmoil for maximum entertainment value. Predictably, they chose the latter. They followed her at her most vulnerable, documenting every moment of pain. For Vicki, this was not just exploitation, it was the obliteration of her dignity. The breaking point. A fateful departure. Vicki's darkest hour came when she was not asked to return as a full-time cast member for season 15 of RHOC. After years of being the face of the franchise, she was relegated to a part-time role as a friend of the housewives. Vicki was blindsided. She had spent years building the show into what it was, and yet Bravo had decided that her time had come to an end. For someone who had given so much of herself, who had been a pillar of the show since its inception, this was more than just a casting change, it was an emotional betrayal. Vicki had always been fiercely protective of her brand and her legacy, but Bravo had made a cold decision to sideline her when it no longer served their business interests. What made this even worse was that Bravo had made this decision with no real dialogue or transparency with Vicki. Her fate was sealed without her input. Vicki's departure felt like an ignoble end to a chapter that had been decades in the making. It wasn't a natural exit or an honorable conclusion to a reality TV career, it was more like a sudden dismissal. Bravo never truly gave her a chance to have a graceful exit, instead choosing to push her into the background while continuing to exploit her personal pain on air. This decision, coupled with the emotional turmoil she was going through in her personal life, left a bitter taste in Vicki's mouth. Vicki's post-exit experience was one of profound alienation. While Bravo moved forward, continuing to cash in on the show's fame, Vicki found herself isolated from a franchise she had helped build. The cameras that once tracked her every move now abandoned her, leaving her with the sobering realization that the network had no loyalty to her as an individual. The emotional fallout. A star left in the shadows. Vicki's departure was not just a career setback, it was an emotional blow that would take years to heal. The trauma of being ousted from the show, after a decade of being its face, was compounded by the realization that Bravo had no qualms about exploiting her vulnerability for ratings. The network had given her no closure, no support, and no respect for her legacy. Instead, they treated her like an expendable commodity, used until they no longer needed her. The show's portrayal of Vicki as a woman in crisis, her dramatic fallout with Brooks, and the tense relationships she had with her co-stars, painted her as someone who was at odds with her own happiness. This narrative was manipulated, dramatized, and edited to suit the needs of a television network that cared far more about sensationalism than about Vicki as a person. And the more Vicki tried to distance herself from the show and move on, the more Bravo seemed determined to keep her tied to it, using her history and her struggles as a perpetual storyline. Even in her absence, Bravo continued to exploit her, referencing her in seasons after her departure, using her name to reignite old drama. The network seemed determined to keep Vicki in the public eye, even when she was no longer part of the cast, which made the final break even more painful for her. In this new reality, Vicki wasn't a cast member, but an icon whose emotional and personal journey would continue to be mined for content. Why Vicki will never forgive Bravo. Vicki's relationship with Bravo is fractured beyond repair because of the way she was treated during her darkest hour. Bravo's approach to Vicki, using her personal struggles as fodder for entertainment, undermined any trust she might have had in the network. For a woman who gave so much of herself to the show, the betrayal was too much to forgive. The final straw came when Bravo never took ownership of the emotional toll their decision to fire Vicki had on her. While the network reaped the rewards of RHOC's success, Vicki was left to deal with the fallout on her own. She was exploited for her vulnerability and tossed aside when the storylines grew stale. There was no acknowledgement, no gratitude for the years of loyalty and hard work she put into the franchise. To Bravo, Vicki was simply another asset to be used until it no longer served their financial interests. For Vicki, this wasn't just about business, it was about human dignity. She gave her heart and soul to the show, and in return Bravo made her feel like disposable entertainment. This kind of betrayal is not easily forgiven, especially when it continues to affect her emotionally long after the cameras stop rolling. The final word as Vicki Gunvalson moves forward in her life, she has made it clear that her time on the Real Housewives of Orange County is in the past. While she may appear at reunions or special events, it is clear that her relationship with Bravo will never be the same. The network used her in ways that were emotionally and personally damaging, and the scars from that experience will never fully fade. Vicki's story is a cautionary tale of the price of fame, the human cost of reality television, and the dangers of being treated as nothing more than a pawn in someone else's game. Bravo made millions off her tears, her triumphs, and her struggles, and in the end, they discarded her without so much as a thank you. For Vicki Gunvalson, The Real Housewives of Orange County was not just a TV show, it was her life. And in that life, Bravo exploited her darkest hours for entertainment, leaving her